Welcome once again to session 2 of our 5-session program of word processing for academic submissions. In this session we will continue on from where we left off in session 1 by looking at page numbers in a little bit more detail. We will look at breaks such as page and session breaks and using whole documents and the from this point forward options available in the paragraph subsection. And finally we will look at the option to use columns within your document to have more than one column of text on a given page. So we'll begin by typing in a little control which gives us some extra text on the screen. It's equals rand, bracket, then the number of paragraphs you require, comma, by the number of lines you require in each paragraph. And then I close the brackets and I press enter. I then have 4 pages of text which we can work with. So I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut control and home to go back to the top of the document, and we're going to start by looking at page numbers and how page numbers work. So once again I can insert a page number, and the page number is part of the header and footer subgroup on the insert, or I can go to the headers and footers design tools and work from there. But I'm simply just going to put in a page number. And I'm going to put it, like we said, at the bottom of the page and in the center. So each page now has a sequential number within the footer. So as we add more pages to the document, those numbers will take on the sequence. So from this point forward, you don't have to worry about what your page numbers are doing. They're going to get on and do the job for you. But there are a couple of little tools within the page numbers which we need to have a look at just to help you get a little bit more control over what's going on. So while we're in the header and footer design ribbon, I'm going to go to the page number option and I'm going to click to get the down arrow, and you can see the second last item on the menu is format page numbers, and if I click on that I get this dialog box. So this allows me to choose a couple of options. And with all these dialog boxes, you'll notice that there's a little question mark here, and that brings you to the help file, and not just to the help file in general, but to the actual part of the help file, in this case, which deals with page numbers and how they're formatted. So the first thing we're going to look at is the number format. Now standard practice would be that it's 1, 2, 3, but you do have the option in this drop down menu to choose different types of numbering. Now this option here allows you to include chapter numbers, so if you're using chapters within your document and there's a requirement to include chapter numbers, you will have them included in there. In a later session we'll be looking at chapters and how chapters work and how they work within the table of contents. Page numbering on its own is a fairly simple process. It puts 1 on page 1 and so on from that, but you might not necessarily want to have a page number, for example, on your title page of your document and on your abstract page, etc. So you would need to separate your document into sections, which we'll be looking at in a moment, and it allows you then to decide where the page numbering comes from. You also have the option here, if I click on start at, and we're starting at page 1, but for example if I wanted to start at page 2 or page 0 or wherever, it will do that. So I'm going to start at page 1. So I'll just say OK to that. We can then move on to some other items. So the next thing that we're going to look at is in the page layout ribbon. And within this ribbon we have the option to control how text works on a page. And probably the most important one in here is the various breaks that are available to us. And you can see there's quite a small button here which is called breaks. But on the submenu to that, there's quite a few options available to you. And the most simple one is a page break. It marks the point at which one page ends and the next page begins. And this is a very handy way to control what text is actually on what page. So for example, if you're using chapters in your document, you can use the page breaks to ensure that the chapter heading appears on a fresh page regardless of what you typed before or after it. And column breaks we'll come back to in a moment. We have text wrapping breaks, we have next page, We have continuous break used to change the formatting style of in mid-page, so we can set it up as a whole new section, but it's actually within the middle of a page. And then you can see the final options we have are the even page and the odd page options. So we can determine that even pages and odd pages in a document behave differently. Well, we just need to move into the document a little bit just to have a look at how these breaks work. So for example, if I go towards the bottom of page 1, you can see that a paragraph starts with 2 lines on page 1 and then goes into page 2. I might decide that would look better if the paragraph actually starts on the new page. Not only would it look better, but it would be better for the reader. So by applying a page break in there, it will force that text onto the next page. Now if I go back to the Home tab for a moment, all of these changes that we're making are controlled by this little button here, and it shows hide control marks. So things like paragraph marks, tab marks, space marks, etc. are available there, and all you got to do is click on the button, and none of these will actually show on your printed page. They're purely there as a reference. They're the hidden markers, and you can show them and you can hide them at will. And you can see I've put a page break on that page. I'm going to be putting in a section break here, but I'm not actually going to do it by a break because I just want to show you how these things actually work. So if I go into a page layout ribbon again, and I go into the page setup dialog box, which we called out in the previous session, and you can see in here I have the option to change the orientation of a page from portrait to landscape. Now if I was to do that now, every page in this document would change to landscape. But what I can do is I can change that to landscape, and before pressing OK, I can say from this point forward. If I say OK to that, you will see very, very quickly that this page is now in portrait mode as it was, and this page is now in landscape mode. But on page 2, at the end of the paragraph, I have a section break, next page, as opposed to a page break. It's breaking the document into a subsection. So you can see that this page and all the subsequent pages are in landscape mode. Now, for example, if I had just a spreadsheet on this page, and that's the only one I want in landscape mode, I now need to go back to portrait. So what I can do is if I click on the next page along, I can again go into the page setup callout, change to portrait, and this point forward. You can see this section is now available because I am in a section of the document now rather than the whole document or this point forward. So by going to this point forward, I can say OK to that. You can see now I have one page in the document which is in landscape format, and all the other pages are now in portrait. And you may have noticed that on this page I now have a number issue because it's gone back to page 1. So I double click in the footer and I can go into page numbers, and I need to format that page number, and I can say continue from previous section. And if I press OK, you'll see that it's now gone back to 3, page 2, page 3, and this one is at 1. So once again, I need to get my cursor onto that page, page numbers, format the page number, continues from previous session. Now if I don't say OK to that, I can leave that as a section and it will restart numbering from number 1 there. Or if I decide I might change that to Roman numerals or whatever, that will go on from that point forward. But if I say from this continue from previous section, I can say OK, and that will return to page 4. So by using page breaks and section breaks, we can control the layout of a document, either by controlling when a page ends or when a chapter starts by putting it on a fresh page, whether the page will be printed in portrait or landscape format. So one thing you will need to check with your horizontal pages is this wide margin is actually at the top of the page. That is going to go into the binding, so everything will be as you expect it to be. So the next thing we're going to look at in this session is the idea of columns. Now, normally on a document you have a single column on a page, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select just this paragraph here, Now what I've done is I've dragged across that paragraph, but another way you can select an individual paragraph is if you just click 3 times anywhere within that paragraph, 1, 2, 3, and it will automatically select the whole paragraph for you. So we have that paragraph selected. Now we're doing this on a paragraph so you'll see the difference, but it could be done over a document or over a page by using section breaks. So in the page layout ribbon, you can see in the page setup subgroup, we have columns. And if I click on the down option, I can choose 1 column, 2 column, or 3 columns. I can choose whether you have a small left column or a small right column. You can also go to more columns, which will open up a dialog box, and you can have again 1, 2, 3 left and right, or you can actually dial in the amount of columns you want if you need more than 3, and you can decide the margins and spacings between each columns. But what we're going to do is we're just going to use the straightforward drop down menu. I'm going to choose 2 columns, and you'll see that the text within that paragraph, if I click outside it, has now been broken into 2 like newspaper columns. And that's all you really need to do. I mean, if that is still a single paragraph, it's been determined where the column ends and the next column starts based on the amount of text that's within there. But also within columns, I have the option to create column breaks. So for example, if I want to take this sentence here and put it in the next column, if I go to my breaks, and you'll see I have a column break, and I can force that text over into the next column. So I'm leaving the space here at the bottom of this column. If I go back to the Home tab for a second, and I click on the Show Hide option, you can see it's actually put a column break in here. So it means then, as you see on the breaks button, you can see what it's actually doing there. It's ending the column and it's going over to start on the new column. Now I've inserted a column break in there. If I click 3 times within here, it still recognizes that as an individual paragraph. And I can decide I don't need columns anymore. I'll go back and I can return that to 1 single column. And you can see what it's done is, even though it still says column break, it's replaced it and it's now behaving as if it was a page break. So what I need to do at this stage is just click there and delete the column break, and I'm back to where I was. So depending on where you might need columns, you can select individual paragraphs, you can select whole pages or sections of your document, and each one in turn can then be given the amount of columns that you need. In a normal academic document, it's a single column throughout the whole document, but there might be times within the document when you need columns, but again, refer to your style guide or seek the advice of your lecturer before using the columns within your document. So that concludes session 2. So there's quite a bit in there, but take a little bit of time to explore them. They will help you in your process of designing your document and getting the style requirements met, and allow you to continue on with the important work of getting the assignment written down.